The wind howled like a beast. My soaked clothes clung to my skin, and with each numb step, I felt my strength draining away. Somewhere in that freezing chaos, I realized I wasn't running to win anymore. I was running to survive. My name is Huang Guanjuan. I left my last breath behind, on the trail of the deadliest marathon in the world. I was born in 1987 in a small town in China's Sichuan province. When I was just a baby, a severe fever stole my hearing and my ability to speak. But it didn't steal my dreams. You might think a deaf-mute child would live a quiet life. But I was loud in my own way. I ran. I ran everywhere. Not because I was trying to win anything, but because running made me feel free. It was the only time I felt completely in control of my body, my life, my path. No voices, no judgment, just the wind and my heartbeat. By the time I was in my 20s, I had started racing in marathons. I wasn't a professional athlete. I didn't have sponsors or fancy equipment, but I had something else, determination. I supported myself by doing odd jobs, working in different positions. Every yuan I earned, I saved for running shoes and travel. In 2019, I even won a gold medal in a marathon at China's National Paralympic Games. That was one of the proudest moments of my life. So when I heard about the Baiying City Mountain Marathon in Gansu Province, I signed up immediately. 62 miles through Yellow River Stone Forest, rugged terrain, twisting trails, and mountain paths. The prize wasn't huge, but for someone like me, it was more than money. It was another chance to prove something, not to the world, but to myself. On the morning of May 22nd, 2021, I stood at the starting line along with 171 other runners. The air was cool, the sun hidden behind light clouds. I wore a thin running shirt, a small waist pouch with energy gels, and my lucky shoes. I smiled as I stretched, though no one could hear it in my silence. I was ready. The first 6 miles were gentle. The path weaved through the towering stone formations, ancient giants standing silent under the soft morning sky. Their surfaces, smoothed by centuries of wind and rain, glowed faintly under the filtered sunlight. The ground was firm, the trail meandering like a river between the stones, easy underfoot. The early breeze caressed my face, playful and cool, carried with it the scent of dust and distant grass. I ran alongside other athletes, their colorful gear bright against the muted earth tones. Some talked cheerfully, their voices rising and falling with their steps. Although I couldn't hear their words, I felt their energy, the rhythm of their breathing, the lightness in their movements, the invisible bond that tied us together as we shared this journey. We were strangers, yet in that moment, we were a community united by a common passion. The first miles passed almost effortlessly. The world seemed to smile upon us. The cool air, the firm trail, the open sky. We climbed higher, step by step. The path narrowed as it wound upward, clinging to the edges of steep cliffs. Each step became slightly more demanding. The ground turned rougher, strewn with small rocks that shifted underfoot. The wind, which had been playful before, now grew stronger. It whipped around the stone pillars, rushing down the gullies with an edge of impatience. It tugged at my jacket, made my eyes water as I glanced up. The sky had changed. The thin morning mist was gone, replaced by heavy, dark clouds pressing low over the mountains. The sun was completely hidden. The light grew dimmer, taking on a cold, metallic hue. The air around us chilled noticeably. It no longer whispered. It bit. Around the 12 miles, something shifted. The transformation was sudden and brutal. The wind, once merely strong, now howled across the ridges like a living creature, tearing at our clothes, pushing us sideways. A sudden, violent gust almost threw me off balance. I stumbled, instinctively pulling my arms closer to my chest to conserve warmth. The others around me did the same, their movements sharp and urgent. Then the rain began. At first, it was only a drizzle, sharp needles pricking the skin. I lowered my head and pressed on. But within minutes, the drizzle turned into a bombardment. Hailstones, small at first, then growing larger, hammered down on us, driven by the furious wind. Each impact stung like a lash against my skin. The hail bounced off the rocks, off my shoulders, off my exposed hands. It accumulated quickly, turning the path slippery and treacherous. I wasn't carrying extra clothes. None of us were. We had all trusted the race guidelines. We believed the weather would stay mild, as they had promised. The organizers had said there might be some wind, maybe a few light showers, but nothing serious. There had been no alerts, no warnings at the starting line, no checkpoint asking for heavy gear. So we had packed light, thin shirts, energy gels, minimal supplies to save weight and time. Now, reality has betrayed those promises. We were exposed, thinly dressed, vulnerable, facing the full wrath of a mountain storm. The hail turned fiercer, the wind howled louder, the temperature plunged further. My fingers began to stiffen. The cold bit into my arms, my legs, seeping through every layer. The thin shirt I wore was useless now, drenched and clinging to my body, offering no warmth. I could feel my strength starting to drain, not from exhaustion, but from the brutal assault of the elements. I kept running, more out of instinct than strategy, because stopping meant surrendering to the cold. But deep down, a terrible truth settled into my mind. We were on a high-altitude mountain ridge, in the middle of a freezing storm, with no shelter, no help, and no way back. And we were utterly, terrifyingly alone. The temperature dropped fast, too fast. One moment, I was running through icy rain, and the next, it felt like I had stepped into a frozen world. The cold wrapped around me like a living thing, squeezing the warmth from my body. The wind screamed across the ridge, a wild, piercing sound that drowned out everything else. It howled in my ears, tore at my wet clothes, rattled the stones at my feet. Hail pounded my face like stones thrown by an invisible hand. Each impact stung sharply, cutting into my skin, leaving numb patches behind. My fingers turned stiff almost instantly. First, I lost fine control, the ability to curl them into a fist or adjust my shirt. Then, I lost all feeling entirely. It was as if my hands no longer belonged to me. My shirt was soaked through, heavy and cold, clinging to my body like a layer of ice. Every movement felt slower, heavier, as if the cold had seeped into my very bones. I tried to keep moving. I told myself, just run. Keep running and you'll stay warm. But it was easier said than done. The trail had turned into a treacherous river of mud, churned up by hundreds of desperate footsteps. Each step threatened to pull my feet out from under me. The slope grew steeper, the rocks slick and dangerous. My legs slipped, my balance failed. I fell once, twice, each time landing hard against the unforgiving ground. The shock of each fall jolted through my frozen muscles, but getting back up was harder every time. My body felt heavier, clumsier, less willing to obey. I wasn't alone. All around me, I caught glimpses of other runners, scattered across the mountainside like broken flags in a battlefield. Some crouched behind rocks, their bodies curled tightly against the wind. Others had collapsed entirely, lying motionless against the mud and stone. One man stumbled toward me, his face twisted in panic. He tried to shout something, maybe a warning, maybe a cry for help, but the wind stole his words before they reached me. All I could see were his wide, terrified eyes. A runner, maybe him, maybe someone else, pressed a foil blanket into my hands. The thin sheet of silver crumpled violently in the wind. Snapping and tearing like a wounded bird, I tried to wrap it around myself. But my hands were too numb, my fingers useless. The blanket flapped and twisted, barely clinging to my shaking body. I could feel my body shutting down. My jaw trembled uncontrollably, my teeth chattering so violently it felt like they might break. My lips had turned blue. My arms and legs were losing strength, my heartbeat slowing, my breathing growing shallow. Instinctively, I curled up beside a large rock, trying to shield myself from the worst of the wind. I pressed my face against my knees, desperately trying to hold onto whatever heat I had left. But the cold was relentless. It crept into my chest, into my heart, each beat growing fainter, slower. My thoughts became sluggish, My vision dimmed around the edges. Was this how it ended? Not with a roar of applause at the finish line. Not with a medal placed around my neck. Not with a proud smile for the cameras. But with silence, cold, endless silence. A silence so deep, it swallowed everything. The wind, the pain, even the memory of why I had run in the first place. And in that silence, for a brief, terrible moment, I understood what it meant to disappear into mountains, alone, unseen, and forgotten. I never finished that race. 20 of us didn't even come back. The storm raged through the night, merciless and unbroken. We lay scattered across the mountainside, some huddled behind rocks, others out in the open, our bodies battered by wind and ice. When dawn finally broke, the world was a different place. The mountain, once full of life and color, now looked like a battlefield. The trail was deserted, littered with fallen gear, torn clothing, and frozen footprints leading nowhere. It wasn't the officials or the race organizers who came for us. They stayed away, trapped by hesitation or fear, or perhaps bureaucracy. It was the villagers, brave, kind-hearted people from the nearby hamlets, who decided they couldn't wait. Ordinary men and women, hearing that runners were missing, strapped on boots and heavy coats, wrapped themselves in what little protection they had, and ventured out into the freezing storm. They climbed the treacherous slopes, pushing against the wind, shouting into the silence. They carried thick quilts over their shoulders. They brought thermoses of hot tea, spare jackets, makeshift stretchers. They didn't have radios or rescue equipment. Only courage and compassion. When they found us, they didn't waste a second. Some threw their own coats over shivering runners. Some wrapped us in quilts, tucking the edges carefully to shield us from the bitter wind. Others carried those too weak to move, staggering under the weight, but refusing to leave anyone behind. Because of them, 151 runners survived. Because of their selflessness, many of us were given a second chance at life. But for 21 of us, it was too late. They found us curled against rocks, lying face down on the trail, still clutching their foil blankets, their frozen hands reaching for warmth that never came. Friends, fathers, mothers, sons, people who had dreamed of crossing a finish line, now lying still under the gray morning sky. The nation mourned. The news spread quickly. Photos of silver blankets scattered across the stone trails, of grieving families waiting for answers. Television anchors choked back tears as they reported the death toll. Social media exploded in outrage and sorrow. People cried out in anger. Why wasn't the race canceled? Why weren't we warned? Why wasn't there proper gear, proper checkpoints, and rescue teams ready to intervene? Questions echoed across the country, each one heavier than the last. But all the anger, all the questions, all the sorrow came too late. Too late for those who would never return home. Too late for those whose dreams ended the marathon in silence and storm. I'm not here to place blame. Blame is a heavy thing, and in the end, it changes nothing. But I do wish, deeply, achingly, that someone, somewhere, had taken the weather more seriously. That someone looked past the medals, the records, the prestige of hosting a successful race, and thought first about the runners, the beating hearts, the living souls, out on that lonely mountain. Because a race is not just about winning. It's about the people who run it, the lives entrusted to its path. And in Gansu, that trust was broken. And for some of us, the price was everything. Though I never spoke a word in life, let me speak now. For once, in this quiet moment, beyond the noise of the world, beyond the rush of headlines and forgotten news, let me lend you my voice, the voice I never had. Please remember us, not just as a list of names printed in black ink, not just as a statistic buried in a forgotten news report. Remember us as dreamers, as people who woke up every morning with fire in our hearts, ready to chase something greater than ourselves. As people who found joy not in winning, but simply in moving forward, step by step, heartbeat by heartbeat, across the wild, open earth. We were runners. But more than that, we were believers. We believed in the mountains, their silent strength, their ancient wisdom. We believed in the rhythm of our footsteps, in the way running stripped away all the noise and left behind only the truth of who we were. We believed in endurance, not just of the body, but of the spirit. I was Huang Guanjun. I lived quietly in a world that often moved too fast and spoke too loudly. I ran freely, across fields, along rivers, up mountains, feeling the wind as my companion and the earth as my home. And I died on the trail I loved, doing what made me feel most alive. If my story can reach you now, if it can stir something small but real in your heart, then my journey didn't end in silence after all. If, when you see a mountain, you think of courage, if, when you run, you remember to be grateful for every breath, every step, if you carry even a fragment of our dreams forward in your own life, then I have finally found my voice. And in that voice, I will live on,